I met our final local speaker 10 years ago at a conference in Chicago. I knew him through his music before I knew him as a friend, but over the last decade, his friendship has been a steady source for me of encouragement in my own creative and vocational journey. Andrew Peterson is an acclaimed singer-songwriter and award-winning author of the Wing Feather Saga and the founder of the Rabbit Room, which exists to foster Christ-centered community through story, art, and music. He lives here in Nashville with his wife and 3 children. Andrew is one of the most creative people that I've ever met, and he's also one of the most grounded people I've ever met, and that's an extremely rare combination, and so I'm glad that he could be here with us tonight. Please welcome my friend, Andrew Peterson.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. So I texted Russ this week and said, hey, man, I've been working on my talk, and I got it down to 7 minutes and 54 seconds, and he said, okay, that's great. It'll give you some breathing room. And I texted back and said, wait, it's supposed to be 8 minutes, right? And he said, no, 9. So I just thought I would just kind of sit here and burn down a minute. Just watch that clock tick down. Just kidding. Okay, so it was the 1980s. You guys remember the 1980s? Anybody who watched Stranger Things will remember the 1980s. And I experienced something that I call imaginational disunity. Let me explain. Picture a kid with a mullet and Converse All-Stars. He's sitting in his bedroom with an acoustic guitar. About 15 feet away from the church parsonage where he lives is the fellowship hall of the church. 2 very separate worlds divided by a sidewalk. The kid does a terrible job of tuning his guitar, but he gets it close enough to play along with the Lynyrd Skynyrd or Tom Petty or Pink Floyd song he loves at the moment. His fingers start to hurt, so he puts the guitar away, and he sneaks the Dungeons & Dragons box out from under his couch. He gets his sketchbook, and he tries to draw some monsters for a while, but he's as bad at that as he is at guitar playing, so he finally grabs a Dragonlance book, and he reads adventure stories. Everything in that kid's life that moves him is contraband. He is not supposed to listen to rock and roll. He is not supposed to have the D&D Dungeon Master's Manual under his couch. He is not supposed to be reading pulp fantasy novels. His Bible, meanwhile, sits on a shelf and gathers dust. My mom and dad were good parents, truly. In addition to feeding us with a wealth of casseroles and fried chicken and good sugar cereal, they had us on a steady diet of memory verses. We were in VBS and Sunday school, youth meetings and youth conferences, and watched videos that explained why rock music was evil. One of them said that the band Journey was satanic because their album covers had spaceships that looked like scarab beetles, and scarab beetles were a part of ancient Egyptian religion, and therefore if we liked the song Don't Stop Believing, then we were on a fast track to seances. And worse, playing Dungeons & Dragons. That was the other part of it, you see. Anything with a dragon in it was viewed with suspicion. But I was enamored with dragons. Half the reason I read Revelation was all that business about the great dragon. For a kid like me, whose imagination was potent and hungry, I was deeply confused. On one hand, I was told that the things that woke me up and stirred me to the possibility that life could be a great adventure was evil. While on the other hand, I was told that the gospel, the Bible, church were things that I ought to love, and those were the very things that put me to sleep. C.S. Lewis, in describing why he wrote the Narnia books, said, suppose that by casting all these things into an imaginary world, stripping them of their stained glass and Sunday school associations, one could make them appear in their real potency. Could not one thus steal past those watchful dragons? For me, those watchful dragons were the ones that convinced me that a life of wonder and fullness could not include a life of ministry, a life oriented to the building of God's kingdom. Many times after watching my father get home from a long, hard day as the pastor of a small church, hospital visits, funerals, sermon prep, board meetings, church politics, my mom would make hilariously passive-aggressive statements at the dinner table. While passing the green beans, she would say, well, I certainly hope at least one of you kids goes into the ministry. My brother and I would look at each other with panic in our eyes. Ministry, as we understood it, meant an abandoning of everything that we loved. There was the world of the church, which denied the art that moved us, and there was the world of the arts, which we were told was in opposition to Christianity. Art and faith were two opposite ends of the world. They were the North and South poles. I assumed that to embrace one would be to shun the other. And then, by the grace of God, everything changed. I'm going to tell you how. 3 ways. I encountered art by Christians that was honest and true and beautiful. 2, I discovered that there was in fact a seat at the table of Christianity for nerdy kids who loved to draw dragons, who loved good music, and who loved film and story. And 3, I was shown a sacramental view of the world. First, I was asked to play piano for a friend, this is the year after high school, who wanted to sing a Rich Mullins song at church. With a great deal of belly aching, I agreed to listen to and learn to play a song called If I Stand. Late one night at the church piano in the empty auditorium, I heard a broken, raspy voice sing the words, "There's more that rises in the morning than the sun. There's more that shines in the night than just the moon. There's more than just this fire here that keeps me warm in a shelter that is larger than this room." His songs were beautiful. They not only painted a picture of a world that was brimming with beauty, but they were crafted with deft poetry and were full of mystery. He wrote passages like this: "From the place where morning gathers, you can look sometimes forever till you see what time may never know. How the Lord takes by its corners this old world and shakes us forward and shakes us free to run wild with the hope that this thirst will not last long, but it will soon drown in a song not sung in vain." And it rhymes. So his songs were beautiful, but they were also honest. He sang, "I'm reeling from these voices that keep ringing in my ears, all these words of shame and doubt, blame and regret." I resonated with the shame and the regret and the painful longing he described. I was lonely. I had regrets. I ached for something that I couldn't name and I couldn't see. He gave me permission to feel those things. But his songs weren't just beautiful and honest, they were true. By that I mean they were steeped in the truth of Scripture. All those verses I had memorized as a kid kept showing up in those lyrics, and were now shimmering with light and life and authority. Never had I encountered anything quite like it. Art that was beautiful, honest, and true. Those 3 things are the recipe for what I believe is the most powerful and world-changing art. So second, I began to see that all of us, even the nerdiest outliers like myself, had been called to ministry. Not necessarily ministry as career, but ministry as vocation, and there's a difference. The building of God's kingdom does not apply merely to theologians and paid pastors, but to everyone, whatever their gifting. Every single man, woman, and child is a bearer of the image of God and has it in their power either to draw attention to or away from the kingdom of God. That means that we're all called to create. To use J.R.R. Tolkien's word, we're all sub-creators. Little creators under orders from the great creator to make and to make and to make, to build signposts to the kingdom. There's a seat at the table for you and for me. That's part of why I buck against the nouning of the adjective creative to describe creative people. There is no such thing as a creative. All that does is create an us-them mentality that degrades the God-given creativity in every person, whether or not they're an artist. Everyone's creative, whether you're an accountant or a painter. You're a sub-creator and you are building a world every day, whether you know it or not. That is part of why we started The Rabbit Room, a publishing house, a yearly conference, a website, an ongoing concert series to build community centered around the gospel and the belief that we are all called to tell the story of the new creation, no matter what our gift is. Finally, I began to understand what it means to have a sacramental view of the world. A few years ago, I realized that all 5 of the books that I was reading at the time, all those books, all the authors had one thing in common. I was reading the poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins, the stories of Flannery O'Connor, the fiction of G.K. Chesterton, the memoirs of Thomas Merton, and the myths of J.R.R. Tolkien. I was drawn to each of them because of their wordcraft, their faith, and the power of their imaginations. Each of those 5 authors was a Catholic. I was shocked and a little panicked, to be honest. I asked an Anglican priest friend of mine what was up, and he said, "Oh, that's an easy one. It's because you're an artist." Catholics, he told me, look at the world as a sacrament. To have an integrated imagination means seeing that the world is brimming with God's presence. Every single beautiful thing can be a window into the great mystery of God. So what would it look like if the church valued art that was honest and beautiful and true? What would it look like if we kept our eyes peeled for the God-given gifting of every single human? What would it look like if we saw that the world was flooded with God's presence? if we remembered, in the words of David Dark, that there's not a secular molecule in the universe. I believe it would mean that those kids who think that they have no place in the church would be enabled to use their gifting, whatever it is, to build signposts to the kingdom. They would see themselves as the hands and feet of Christ, striding into the broken world to make all things new. Thanks.